was Keogh's classmate. He was his nickname was Hilly when he was at the academy. Hilly was his nickname, and he and Keogh were there. Keogh was there with a lot of other. Keogh got injured, so he left the Marine Corps as a major. But most of his other classmates were admirals and stuff. So he could go to the Pentagon and walk into these guys' offices because they knew him. They were friends, and he could get stuff out of the Navy. That was his big thing. He could talk to the. I don't know if Radford was the one he could talk to, but he had 2 or 3 people that he could talk to. The guy that was in charge of Office of Naval Research after Radford, he was a personal friend of Keogh. So, Keogh had a lot of military contacts. Besides the ones he got when he
Richard Hall
besides the ones he had when he was aide to Charles Lindbergh, and then he worked at the Civilian Aeronautics Authority, so he had more contacts in the government there. Keogh had huge contacts in the government. Helen Carter figures in the UFO story a whole bunch of times. When Helen Carter took over the CIA, he wrote a letter out to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And he said, listen, Air Technical Intelligence, I see no reason to duplicate the assets of Air Technical Intelligence that you have at Wright-Patterson and with the Navy's Bureau of Aeronautics. I see no reason to duplicate those assets in the CIA. So I am going to rely on you people to do Air Technical Intelligence information. And I talked
Admiral Roscoe Hillenkotter, he was the first CIA director, but you're saying they were starting to split.
No, he's not the first CIA director. He was not the first CIA director.
Well, why did they say that?
Director of Central Intelligence was a guy named Seuss. Oh God, I can't remember.
He was the first director. He was a board member, at least.
No, he was not the first director.
How many directors did they have? Vandenberg. Well, let's get all this Hillenkotter, Vandenberg, and all of that. We got to go back and get all this straight, because NICAP said the spiritual leader of NICAP, 56 through the 70s, Major Donald Kehoe. He wrote his books, Flying Saucers Are Real, 1950, and Flying Saucers from Outer Space, 53. Now, I thought that's the one that Stan got hold of, and a lot of people did. You know how later on Zachariah Sitchin fires up everybody on the Sumerian text, right? But wasn't it Major Donald Kehoe that got everybody started 56 to 70? Because you've been doing this since Project 1947. So all this is there with NICAP, right?
Kehoe was asked in 1949 by the editors of True to help them investigate UFOs. He was asked by the editors of True, John DeBerry, and I forget the other guy's name. Anyways, he was his book Flying Saucers Are Real came out in serialization in newspapers and magazines starting in 1949, and then the book came out from Fawcett Publishing in 1950, and it was a bestseller. Then Keogh, in '53, Keogh, the book Flying Saucers from Outer Space was published. In 1956, Flying Saucers Conspiracy was published. In 1960, Flying Saucers Top Secret was published. They were all Keogh books, and then the last Keogh book that he wrote was Aliens from Space, and that was in the 80s. He was working on another book before he died, but he had just notes and a couple of chapters sketched out. That's as far as that got.
Well, should we, like me and Janet and you are starting this now, okay? We're pulling in your Project 47 with, I know you may not like it, but Bob Dean, because we're not going to leave anybody behind that's been a ufologist, or because Bob Dean claimed it, damn it, you know, and he lost one of his jobs. He got a settlement for $100,000 over it, but damn it, I'm not going to leave him behind, okay? So, you know, in spite of UFO conspiracy theories, who are we going to establish as the first ufologist among us people that worked inside the government? Would you want to give it to Kehoe, or you want to put somebody before that?
Well, Kehoe was not inside the government at the time. He was a freelance writer and reporter.
But he was a Marine pilot. I'm not in the Navy now, but I'm doing this now for real, you know? So how do you want to do
this?
It's
hard to say who the first guy was, but
well, we got to do it. Nobody else is going to do it.
I had hoped tonight to get on to talk about the history of the how the project was set up and everything, and explain a number of the documents that people have mistaken ideas about, and how they all fit together.
All right, well, make your timeline. Janet, we're going to do this weekly, hon, so are you up for it?
Here's the thing. Now, when 47 hit, some of the first things that were said by the PIO, so bring one in here. If you got a flying saucer, bring one in here. That's one of the first things that they said.
Okay.
And then these are the public relations guys. On the 3rd of July, Don Johnson, who was instrumental in getting the Idaho National Guard established, Idaho Air National Guard established. So he wasn't the head of the Air National Guard, but he was one that fought for its establishment and everything. So he called General Twining at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and he talked to General Twining on the 3rd of July, and he said, listen, this flying saucer thing has something to it. He said, I'm going to give you 5 sightings that you should check out. And I guess Twining and Johnson knew each other, or either that or Johnson had a good rap. But Johnson had a UFO case or UFO sighting several days later. But this is in July, just before the 4th of July weekend. So
okay, let's go there.
So he talked to Twining. Twining wrote up a little memo to General Brentanel, who was in charge of T3, which was engineering at Wright-Patterson. And he told him, we are going to establish a UFO program. Now, I was going to explain to people today how all this started, but anyways, this is part of this thing. That's the first military. That's the first. Here's
the line in the sand, Jan, and Janet will too, and I will too. So you want to start all the way back before even Kehoe made it popular, Fate magazine.
So Twining was the first guy, and it was in the newspaper after the 4th of July weekend that AMC was going to investigate UFOs. And Twining did that under his own authority. Now, later on, he did ask Vandenberg, can I... he did check with Vandenberg, but he had the authority to do that by himself. He could start a project up at Wright-Patterson. He could just try, because he was 3-star general. He had the authority to do it. They had already given him authority.
That explains why I kept getting thrown over to Wright-Patterson, and I never understood it. So, because they had me doing this before I even knew I was doing it. So this is really curious. So Air Force partnerships with the STEM, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and is it Dr. Steph? No, that's not it. So you're saying Johnson with Johnsson or Johnston? Because I'll have to go back and listen to this because I'm not writing nothing down.
Don Johnson was the aviation editor for the Boise Statesman. There's more than one newspaper. The Boise Statesman newspapers. He was the aviation editor.
So you're going to start the original UFO story back. Janet, he wants to get all this recorded proper because of all the infighting in the military about all this stuff, and you know how Stan had the SOM-1 with Robert Wood and all that stuff. Don, and I kept telling her it was going to go back to Bill Moore and stuff because there was a cover-up. But we got to prove that, Janet. So let's go
I don't
back.
have to prove anything about Bill Moore. I know he's a faker.
He
admitted he was a faker. We don't need to prove anything.
Okay.
So,
so we'll go back.
Johnson was interested in UFOs from the very. He did one of the first articles on Kenneth Arnold. Kenneth Arnold. If you look in the Statesman newspaper, Kenneth Arnold is sitting at a drafting board, sketching out pictures of what he saw on the drafting board, and Don Johnson is interviewing him right there. So
wow, Don Johnson. Okay, well, Janet, right? Make sure we got that. But everybody, so we're going to start with the. And
Don
Kenneth
Johnson
Arnold
was in the National Guard, so he was a military man too, besides being an aviation editor.
Yes, I report Air Force Falls. Okay, so he was a private pilot. Kenneth Arnold was a private pilot. So Kenneth Arnold was a private pilot. Now they give him credit in Wikipedia, whether you agree or not, because they won't let us change it. That's UK dudes or girls or whoever seem to run Wikipedia. But June 24th, 1947, Fred Johnson was a witness to Kenneth Arnold's squadron of flying saucers. So who's Fred Johnson?
He's a prospector, and he came forward about a month later.
Damn, you're good at this. You're a really deep researcher.
It's called Project 1947. I pretty well know everything. Most of the stuff that went on in 47. If it's someplace that I can get my hands on it.
So is that why Bilderberger was interested in you?
I don't know. I don't know who Bilderberger.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. All right, let's say Bigelow. Let's say Robert Bigelow was interested in you.
No, Bigelow didn't like what I was doing.
What?
He didn't like it.
Now, wait a minute. I know unless you were an engineer, you had trouble working for him. And all right. Well, wait a minute.
I didn't work for him. I tried to tell you he gave money to the UFO Research Coalition. That's who I was working for. Dick Hall, Mark Rodiger, and